Hey everybody, welcome back to Video So Terrac Entertaining series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and since our last preview on the work in progress core, it has been updated twice, so we're going to be taking you through a tour of some new games we haven't tested before, and some games that have seen a lot of improvements, because SRG320 is now updating this thing like 3 to 4 times a week it seems, and we're all benefiting from these awesome changes. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out, and if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. Now everyone and their uncle has been asking for a retest of Final Fight Revenge because it did stop working for a while, and I'm always surprised that so many people want to see this game in action. This definitely is a love it or hate it title, and I kind of fall on the love it side of things. I understand that mechanically it's not the greatest game in the world, but any sort of 3D fighting game in the Final Fight universe just 100% does it for me. And obviously we didn't get any of the Street Fighter EX games over on the Sega Saturn. Those are the domain of the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 1 arcade hardware, so getting a Capcom 3D fighter on Sega Saturn was always a welcome addition, and for the most part this just seems to be working exactly as it should. All of the character portraits are there, all of the models are loading in, all of the speed and gameplay is sound. Now compare that to something like Virtua Fighter 2 that can have a little bit of slowdown every once in a while, and it seems like Final Fight Revenge is performing much better than some of the other 3D fighting games on the platform, although we recently got those Dead or Alive speed increases, so it's not all of them. But you'll see here, this is just working again as expected. Last time we took a look at this game, some of the polygons could be a little bit problematic and some of those shadows would have a little bit of flickering that shouldn't be there, but now if you've loaded up in the current core, this is exactly as it should play on a real Sega Saturn piece of hardware, and it's one of those things, try to stick with the game. It does not really telegraph anything, it doesn't help you get any better, and the AI can sometimes be downright cheap, but when you actually start to play it a little bit more, maybe you'll start to really enjoy the game. I'm not here to try to convince you that it's some hidden gem that no one's ever played before. It is definitely a janky 3D fighting game on Sega Saturn, but if you know me in the channel, you know I love 3D jank, and that's why I really do appreciate Final Fight Revenge. But as a test of how the core is doing, this is so much more improved than the last time we took a look at it, and I know so many of you wanted to see a retest on this. I couldn't help myself because I actually find the game charming. But go ahead and look at the 3D models, look at the 2D backgrounds, look at all the different effects coming off the punches and special moves. I can't see anything in this image that doesn't look absolutely outstanding, and I will say graphically, I actually like how the models on this game look. Mike Hagar there being just a little bit blocky, it has that pure Sega Saturn look that everyone used to love back in the day, and I think this game has actually aged relatively well because it never actually started as a very pretty game. That means it can stay a little bit ugly. Now moving on to a game that we were all hoping would see improvements but did not is X-Men vs Street Fighter. Basically this is doing almost the exact same thing it did last time. You can see the intro bump screen, you can get to the menu here, you can get to the character selection screen. This all seems to be working totally fine. You've got your normal auto and turbo mode selection as well. Everything loads up like you were playing real Sega Saturn hardware. What you're going to see here, once we actually get into the game, it is going to freeze, but now it seems to get further into the game before it actually freezes. So it's an improvement, but it's still not a playable experience. Now another game that's been promoted to working, and I had to show this, is Quarterback Attack, because I live in Chicago and Mike Ditka is basically God in my land. Honestly, I didn't grow up here, but if you ask any Chicagoan about Mike Ditka, you're going to hear nothing but amazing things, and that's just how it works here. But this was one of those things that was on Sega CD, it came to Sega Saturn, and it is such a strange experience. It's a full motion video game where you play the quarterback of a football team. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but this is the sort of thing we got in the 90s. If you weren't playing a 3D or a 2D game, you were playing an FMV game, and I just recently showed you Corpse Killer, and Quarterback Attack is another game that's been promoted to working that didn't used to work whatsoever, and this is definitely taxing on the data transfer of the Sega Saturn in the fact that it's always streaming full motion video as you are playing the game, but honestly you basically just select a few things and different video tracks will play. This is a modern version of something like Dragon's Lair, and it's one of those things, you either love this genre or hate this genre, but tell me down below, did you ever play this game back in the day? Because I had it when I was a kid, I didn't love it then, and I'm still a little bit confused by it now. A big thanks to Andy D for helping with some of the footage on this playthrough as well. He's the one playing Quarterback Attack, and I think he had about as much trouble as anybody else will, because 100% just got sacked there. But it does have some really clear audio for the Sega Saturn core, and you get to hear Coach Ditka talk a little bit, which is always a treat if you're from the Midwest. So go ahead and listen to the audio for like 35 seconds, and I'll be back with more games that just work.
I got one word for you, kid. Score!
I mean, not much to say about the soundtrack there because it's just crowd noises, but it was one of those things. That's just the type of game we got in the 90s sometimes. Now, moving over to Afterburner, this has had a lot of interesting changes. There were some progressions on it would basically not load up for anybody, then it would sometimes load up, and that seems to be where it is. The core can sometimes feel very organic depending on what you're doing. Sometimes you'll have success playing a game and other times you will not. Sometimes if you're playing a game before you try a game that doesn't load, suddenly it will load up. So Afterburner here is one of those games. It can be a little tricky to actually get it into the game without it freezing, but once you get in game, everything seems to work outside of the audio, which is not existent on Afterburner. It's not playing any music, it's not playing any sound effects. You are going into this game 100% mute. What I want to take a look at is all of the graphics, because last time we took a look at this game, I think there were some issues in some of the sprites and some of the scaling. Now it looks like Afterburner should on the Sega Saturn as far as I can tell, and again, if you see anything, leave me a comment down below, because I only have 2 eyes. With the viewers here, we're talking about maybe 10,000 eyes plus. Kind of weird to think about how many eyes are watching, but it is the basic math. And it's one of those things, audio does seem to still be a little bit of an issue on the core, and I know that we have improvements in the audio levels on the DSP, but there still seems to be some underlying code that either needs to be implemented or cleaned up for these games to continue to get their audio. Sometimes it'll drop out, sometimes it won't play, sometimes it'll be perfect, but on the games that have no audio definitely is lacking that experience. But from a graphical standpoint, a control standpoint, and a playability standpoint, if you just muted your Sega Saturn and played Afterburner, you would have the exact same experience you do here on the MiSTer FPGA Core if you got the game to load. And that's the thing, this used to be a much larger situation with the core where a lot of games would sometimes load and sometimes not. Now we're down to like 2 or 3 games that present problems, and considering how large the Sega Saturn library actually is, that is a highly impressive uptick in performance. Because I said in the last video, we're over 95% of the North American library playable. We are just talking about edge cases, but the ones you ask about, and they're the ones that I like to show. So if you want to play Afterburner today, just try to launch it a few times. Once you get into the game, it'll be 100% good. It just won't have any audio. And moving over to 3 Dirty Dwarfs, this is another game that a lot of people have been asking to see retests on, and it has definitely improved since the last time we took a look at it, because it had a lot of sprite issues last time. And when I think I took a look at it last, we couldn't watch the FMV either because it would tend to freeze the core. That is obviously right now 100% not what's happening whatsoever. All of this hilarious, ridiculous video plays with all of the different voiceover. This game makes no sense. It didn't make any sense back when it came out. It doesn't make any sense today. It's a very strange, weird hybrid beat 'em up that kind of feels like playing Guardian Heroes, except with 3 obviously Dirty Dwarves. And I would say that it's definitely not to Guardian Heroes levels of fun, but it is still a good experience. And this intro FMV is always hilarious, and I'm so glad that all of these FMVs do work on the core now, because there's some straight 90s gold when it comes to the full motion video you can get on Sega Saturn. But as we move into the actual gameplay portion here, everything again looks correct. The shadows underneath the sprites themselves, the background layer, I don't see anything here as far as how those are drawing that make me think it isn't working like a real Sega Saturn, where last time there would be some breakup in the sprites, sometimes the sprites wouldn't have shadows. It just seemed to be not implementing the graphics in the proper methodology. But this is definitely not an easy game. Take 3 hits and you're moved back to the beginning, and the attacks are very strange as well, throwing bowling balls, trying to hit baseballs. It's a very unique game, and I know a lot of people love it. I've just never been a huge fan, but leave me a comment down below and tell me, what is it that I'm missing about 3 Dirty Dwarves? How should I try to play this to make it a little bit more fun? Because some of these attacks here just make the game feel harder than it necessarily should. But maybe I just suck at the game as well. That's always a possibility. But if you want to play 3 Dirty Dwarves today, you absolutely can do that. I know a lot of people love it. It seems to be working totally fine on the current core. But let's switch over from a game that everyone knows to a game that I literally did not know existed until it was in SRG 320's patch notes. This is Senkin Kyuden, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It is a Taiwanese developed isometric role-playing game for the Sega Saturn. I literally had no idea what this game was when it showed up on the GitHub patch notes, but apparently it did not run in the core, so SRG 320 looked into it, updated it, and got the game running. And that's the thing about the Sega Saturn library. It's not infinite, but it is large, and every once in a while there is a game that someone just has not heard of. But leave me a comment down below and tell me if you know what this is. I'd be very surprised if anyone's actually ever played it or even heard of it, or maybe it's just me, because like I said, when I saw the title in the patch notes, I had absolutely no idea what the game was. I had to copy and paste it into Google and see what was going on, and that's the first time I knew of its existence. But it's got some great music. I can't read the text, so go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back. So yeah, the audio sounds great as well, but again, it's just one of those things. Certainly don't speak the language, never heard of the game before, have absolutely no idea what's going on. So this is a test from a pure curiosity standpoint because I just needed to know what this game was. And this is an Andy D capture as well because I don't think I'd ever heard of it either, so big thanks to him. But it's one of those things. Maybe this is your favorite game on the Sega Saturn, maybe you can read the text, maybe this is something you've been waiting for. There's a ton of JRPGs on Saturn, a lot of which haven't been translated, and I look for a translation of this and it seems like no one's even attempted to do it, so maybe it's just not that popular of a game. But it's got a very interesting art style. I love the isometric view, I love all the realistic colors, and as far as this game is concerned, I guess it probably looks like real Sega Saturn footage, but I've never seen that in my life because I've never heard of the game before. And that's the situation with the current Sega Saturn Core as of recording this video. Obviously the next time we get an update, I will run another batch of tests, and again, if there's a game you want to see retested that I haven't retested yet, leave me that comment down below, because a lot of you asked for Final Fight Revenge, and that's the one that made this video, because I do try to get to all of those requests. But the Sega Saturn Core keeps getting better. I can't wait to see what the next update is, and hopefully soon we get light gun support, because there's a lot of great light gun games I want to check out. But short of that, I'm done, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.